Hey, welcome back to the show. I appreciate you coming back. You can see on the screen, I have a guest with me again today. His name is Reverend Frederick Shaw. Fred, welcome to the show. First, I'm going to introduce you, but while you're sitting there, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me on the show, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to express my feelings on this subject.
Well, so you know who you're listening to. Fred is, just so we all know, I've known this gentleman for probably at least 30 years. He and I met years and years ago, and I wish we could stand next to each other because the man is huge. He's, what are you, Fred, 6'5", something like that?
6'6", 270.
Okay, 6'6", 6'7", even. Maybe you're shrinking.
6'6", 270 pounds.
Okay, the man is large and has a major presence, and when I met him the first time, I looked up and always do. He is a former Los Angeles County Sheriff Deputy. He's currently the Citizens Commission on Human Rights International spokesperson, and he's also the Executive Director of the NAACP Inglewood South Bay branch, and also you've been involved with the NAACP in Compton, you told me.
Right.
Did I cover it right? Did I miss anything there, sir?
You're right on. That's the main things, yes.
Well, I asked you if you would come on the show. It is a time in our country that there is unrest. We all know that. I couldn't think of anyone that I wanted to talk to us just because I know your history of growing up in South Central LA, growing up on the streets. You know what it's like. You've been in law enforcement. You're now in a human rights organization. You're part of the NAACP. I couldn't think of anyone to go to try to give us a little bit of an understanding of what, look, obviously looking at me, I am a pure white dude. I grew up in a little town on the prairie up in South Dakota in 12,000 people, and we had one black family in town for a while. That's all I remember as a kid. I would say that the good side of that is I never had any prejudice because there was never been anybody around to even talk about being prejudiced. I just never understood it. It's like, what's the problem? So that's probably the good side of it, but we certainly didn't grow up with minorities. I grew up in a very white community, so I don't know anything that what's going on in the world of the upset that's happening, obviously, other than what we've seen of the video of George Floyd. I looked at it again this morning. Anybody that's out there, I recommend you go to the New York Times. I have railed on the New York Times about being so partisan, liberal when it comes to politics, but this piece that they put together of video footage from security cameras and people videoing what happened to George Floyd is simply unbelievably outrageous. What they did for 9.5 minutes of kneeling on this man on his neck as he's begging for that he cannot breathe. It's just, I don't know anyone that could watch that and not think what in the hell is going on there. So, but again, from my perspective, I'm coming from my community. I don't understand the what happens to the black community, and I'm just hoping you can shed some light on it for us.
Well, the first thing that I want people to get about watching that video is the comfort that the officers have while they're doing that. People are videotaping them and they don't care. People are begging for their life, this man's life, saying you're killing him, and they don't care. We cavalierly have our hand in our pocket. We even kind of rock on his neck a little bit with the knee. The man is saying he can't breathe. Then we see a reverse view, and the man can't even defend himself body-wise as far as being checked out because two other officers have their knees on him. And then you got one as a lookout, waving people on, telling them to go on about their business. And, the idea that they could be so comfortable and uncaring raises the question, how many times have they done things like this? Because most of us would say, oh, people are watching and move on, but they didn't feel the need to. That's how comfortable they were. This guy, the main culprit, had his knee on the neck. This man had something like 18 different complaints. At what point do you say maybe he doesn't belong in the street, or maybe he's doing the mindset of a lot of law enforcement officers that blacks see with these unions and stuff, basically justifying his action and getting away with it?
It does seem that the unions, that came up pretty strongly, of why didn't they arrest him sooner? Why didn't they charge him sooner? And from what I've read, coming back out of the police department in Minneapolis, no, actually, it wasn't from there. It was someone else outside of that community who's been in law enforcement blaming the unions, because there's a certain procedure legally that is set up in order for police to go through, and potentially we have that needing to be changed or something, because it seemed to take a while for something that's so egregious like this to get charged.
And the police unions, they have basically, when people say Black Lives Matter, then they say all lives matter, but all lives are not being killed that way. All lives are not jogging down the street and people jump them and kill them. All lives, isn't a kid walking through a community where a guy can on his own think he can go and stop this individual and check him out when he's not even a law enforcement officer, and law enforcement has told him to stand down. So it's like, and what Black people are seeing is the systematic racism, to where I'm walking down the street minding my business, you can approach me, and then they say you have the right to stand your ground, not me have the right to stand my ground when you approach me. So these are the things that we're looking at, that is part of the systemic racism that is going on in our country with law enforcement and the community. And having been a law enforcement officer, I know what the officers are looking at, and I know what the community is looking at. And they're two different viewpoints altogether. And so when we look at this stuff, the tragedy is, if you get stopped by the police, they expect you to comply. If I get stopped by the police, they expect me to obey. There's a difference in the two. And that's the problem that we face,
Wow, that's strong. So before so many questions come up, I want to point out also to the viewers, if you watch that video in the New York Times, it becomes clear, even worse. Well, I don't know if it can be worse. They're kneeling on his neck, but they're telling him to get up, and he's trying and he can't. And they're telling him to get up while they're kneeling on him, and he's trying to comply. He said, I will, whatever. Yes, I will. But they're kneeling on him. What is this was that, you need to take, you want
to, it'll go off. I forgot to unplug it.
Yeah. No problem. Is that moment of that video? I just, there's the video was so egregious, and obviously things have exploded, and obviously there's more going on than just that. But was that truly the spark when people saw the knee on the neck, the trying to get up, he can't get up, all the things were, and 9 minutes of it? Was it just the last straw, or that was so egregious that there's no way that it could have been ignored?
Well, I think it's both. It's kind of the last straw on a whole line of killings that have happened. And then it was so egregious that the white community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community all felt that they had to come out and support Blacks in this movement, because of the fact, if you get to that point where in broad daylight with everybody filming you, you can do that, then I think most of these other kids realize their time is coming also. And so I think they are being smart. It's like we used to do in the street. If a gang came into our community and was attacking somebody, a lot of us would come out to defend, because our turn is next. So that's what you're looking at, because we out in California, we have kids in Newport Beach. These are fluent areas marching, where the minority in that march is Black people, but the majority of white people standing up for Black people, which, let me tell you, which is very comforting to our youth, because they're seeing other people stand with them. And basically the older generation is going to fall out. We're going to all move on. But the younger people are the leaders of the future. They're the one, and they're standing together. And that is a positive thing that has come from this. And, so we're happy to see that. But we've seen egregious killings. I, as a law enforcement officer, know how bad the tactics were when they killed the little 12-year-old kid at the park with a toy gun. Their tactics were so bad that they couldn't even have believed that the kid actually had a real gun. You do not drive up right in front of the person and gun them down. If you thought it was an adult with a, you would be back on a bullhorn, hey, drop the gun, blah, blah, blah. They just rolled up on, boom. I haven't been able to check it out today, but I hope this isn't true. But evidently in San Francisco, somebody on their knees with their hands up was gunned down by a policeman who shot through the windshield of his car and killed the kid. I haven't had a chance to check it out because just literally moments before we came on. But if that's happening, then you got rogue cops that are taking advantage of this situation to help fuel the fire. And I want to make it clear as a ex-law enforcement officer, 80% of all law enforcement officers I've ever met would run into a building to save a kid of any color, would tackle the fires of a car to pull somebody out of any color, would do what they could to help a person. But there is a group in there that are hidden perpetrators of violating the law. And that group seems to get the publicity, and then the other group, their sin is they're afraid to speak up because of the system. And that's where it is. And when you do speak up, like I did when I was in the department, you can find yourself up under all types of attacks and end up standing alone. And so a lot of officers are faced, do I feed my family or do I take this stand? And so that's what we're facing. But the majority of all law enforcement officers are good people. And you see this by law enforcement officers taking the knee in the middle of the street. I marched with the clergy the other day. The highest ranking officer on that scene, a black guy, took a knee right with us. We looked around and many of the officers were taking a knee with us. So that is encouraging to know that everybody's not a part of this rogue behavior, that there's a lot of people who are supporting, and even the sheriff and the LAPD chief, they've been lenient in a lot when they could have really cracked down because everybody understands what this is about now, where in the past, everybody didn't understand what it was about.
So is training missing? Is it just the rogueness of these guys that just want to cause havoc?
Yes, the rogueness. It's not the training. Training is a way to escape the problem. If it was a training problem, they would be doing the same things to white people, but it's not. It's only going on into black people and a lot of times in the Hispanic communities. So I know that it's more of a mindset. It's not training. When I went through the training of the academy, they taught you the proper way to do things. What happens is when you hit the street, you have a training order that's a training officer who's a seasoned vet. And then he tells you, take all of that you learned in the academy, throw it away, put it in your memory. Let me teach you how to survive in the street. So you actually become part of his mindset, not part of the mindset that you're trained under when you're coming through the academy. And a lot of those guys, they do teach you great things to survive, great things. But unless we start getting black officers on the departments in greater numbers, we've seen great change since the 92 riot. There's a lot of high-ranking blacks in law enforcement and things now. There at least is an attempt to address the problem. It's just moving too slow, and they haven't found out a way to root out that rogue group.
And is it just whites, or do we have colored officers also being part of that rogue group?
No, we have black people that are part of that rogue group. Some of them are part of it because they want to be accepted in the department. They want to be able to move up the ranks. They want to be able, but the truth of the matter is, I've known people who moved up the ranks who kept their integrity, who just did their job so efficiently nobody could deny them. But when you start trying to absorb into a different culture, you start doing those things, then you start behaving like the majority. You know, people kind of take on the behavior of the power of the group. So, you know, that's what we're looking at. So it's a black officer can be just as rogue as a white officer, but I would tend to think people like myself who grew up in Willowbrook, Compton, South Central Los Angeles, who wanted to work in those communities, they come with a different mindset. They come in more on, I'm just giving people justice. I used to tell people in the jails, I do not do favors, but I will give you your rights. And that's what I think that's the stand that we have to take.
It was interesting to me that a couple of the officers involved in the George Floyd situation looked minority to me. One certainly looked Asian. I think the other one might have been Hispanic. Just fascinating that, first of all, I don't even know how someone could stand around and watch what that one officer was doing. But secondly, if you're also a minority going, what is going on? Someone's rights, it would seem they may be more sensitive to the rights versus someone who's white like myself, who doesn't really have that kind of problem.
Well, what you're looking at is a mindset that has come down from the early days of psychiatry, when you had Dr. Benjamin Rush say that Black people's skin was dark because they had a disease that was akin to leprosy, and whites should be separated from them. And the only way to know if a Black man was cured or sane is if he turned white. You had, during the slavery times, Samuel Cartwright with Drapetomania saying that if a slave had the impulse to run away, regardless of his conditions, that you could pass his wife around to all of your friends, you could sell his children, you could castrate or beat him. If he ran away from that condition, then he was considered mentally ill. If he backtalked or disobeyed, he was considered mentally ill. So when you have an industry like that perpetuating the idea of an inferior people, and that comes through the mainstream, comes through the media, comes through your written and print, you comes through all of these things, people start observing and believing that. And so it's like, it becomes part of the system, be it through eugenics, be it through whatever, it becomes part of the system, and you can do things to minorities, Blacks. You could do Tuskegee experiments and give them syphilis and let them die out watching. You can give them psychiatric drugs or electric shock in the prison systems. You can do all of that thing to them because you don't consider them to be human beings. Even in the early days of the Constitution, Blacks was considered three-fifths of a human being. So this stuff comes down into our culture. So an Asian person, when something is happening to a Black person, don't identify. He don't say himself like that. When an Hispanic person who was not here, who went through what the Blacks in this country have gone through, they were able to pick up on it later, they don't quite identify. I know at CCHR, where we have our museum, when I show the Hispanic kids, we go into the racism section and they see all of the Blacks and the whippings and they're like, wow. And then I show them where they said that Hispanics shouldn't be able to have babies. And then all of a sudden they get real offended. But they didn't quite get offended just before that. It was interesting until it got to them. Well, but that's the cultural shaping and engineering that we see that is going on,
Explain, since you brought up the museum, CCHR's museum, what is that they were looking at?
We have a 500-year history of psychiatry, of mental health, from psychiatry pretty much, from its origin to the modern day educational systems. And it goes through and show how psychiatry was involved in the Holocaust and racism. It talks about electric shock. It talks about the mass drugging of children and things like that. And so, and it's on and on. It tells about in fact, if your listeners want some information, they can go to cchrint.org and they can get information. They can use a database. They can do all of that. And we are right now creating a 3D virtual tour, since we're all locked down, to where people can tune into it and see it, because a lot of our law enforcement, our criminal justice classes, our psychiatric nurses, regular nurses, psychologists, a lot of them have the museum as part of their curriculum. So we have to create a virtual tour so that we can be able to still service them, since nobody can come to the museum right now. And it's called Psychiatry and the Industry of Death. It's at the CCHR, Citizens Commission on Human Rights headquarters.
Okay, good. Powerful. drugging. Let's talk about that for a second. I got a lot of other questions. What's going on today? But you brought up drugging. They say George Floyd was on fentanyl. That's what I read this morning from even the independent autopsy. Does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter. Because whatever he was on, the video showed that he was not resistant. He was not trying to harm the police officers. He was in a very helpless position. And whatever he was on, we shouldn't treat a person like that. So if he was on anything, if he had taken wine or beer, if he had smoked marijuana, if our whole society is going toward a drug culture. So you can take that same type of viewpoint on anybody, but we can't let that be an excuse. What it is that you held a man down who was helpless, who could not defend himself, and you put your knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes, and he died, and you continued to hold it on there another 246 minutes. I mean, 2 minutes and 46 seconds. That is the issue. We're not going to get sidetracked with this other stuff that justifies. The issue was the treatment, what we saw on video. We didn't see him take tape, and maybe he did. You know, maybe he was in pain. Maybe we don't know what it is, but that had nothing to do with the way they murdered him.
So the drugging of, I'm familiar with, there's a lot of drugs being pushed onto the lower, poorer classes they get involved with the system, especially kids that are then don't have homes, or they're in being taken care of by the county or something. I think you can talk to isn't there quite a bit of drugs being pushed to try to calm the kids down? Ritalin, things like that. Is that happening?
That is happening all throughout our juvenile justice systems, be it probation, be it the Department of Children and Protective Services, be it foster care. There is a mass drugging of children, a lot of them which are Black in that system. There's a lot of drugging in our educational system. So if you have not taught me how to read, then you can give me a drug and give me a label to excuse the inability to do that. I went through that in my education. I actually got all the way to Pepperdine University and couldn't really read. And later on, I taught myself how to read and found ways to how to study and look up words and correct things when I didn't understand what was going on. And then I was able to teach myself. Now I write novels and everything. So this educational system where they test the children in the 3rd grade to know how much prison space they're going to need, this is by design. It is not by accident.
What are you talking about?
I have heard from the superintendent of schools that was in the Compton Unified School District and others that they test the children. Some people say 4th grade, but this guy and others have said in the 3rd grade, because they know the connection between education and crime. So if the 3rd grade you are testing below, they know pretty much that your chances of out here and really being productive become low, and they know that they're going to need a prison space for you.
Get out of town.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, just think of it. The whole idea that Black people can't learn is part of the justification for them not being able to make it in this world. It's part of, well, they're not really intelligent human beings, so if we put a knee on them. I heard a young person say the other day, and these young people, man, they're a different type of breed. He said, well, Kaepernick took a knee for justice and nobody could have it. Now this guy takes a knee using it as a weapon. I believe in the end, this is what this kid said, God is going to put us all on our knees before this is over with.
Wow.
So, it's like, because you won't be able in the future to sit it out because our white friends won't let you. See, that's the thing. They always have given programs and subsidy money, and this has been going on since Martin Luther King and then March in and we ended up with the riots in 1965. Why was that? Police abuse. 1992. Why was that? Police abuse. In Baltimore, what was that? Police abuse. Now we're here again. What is that? Police abuse. Well, every time there's riots and unrest, then everybody, the politicians come and promise you a whole bunch of feel-good free stuff.
Right.
And then they don't address the problem. And they have to start addressing the problem, because as long as you do this, then 55 years from now, we will be having these protests and the riots and all of this stuff. But the sophisticated law enforcement systems will, be able to kick in, and it's going to be a mess. So these young people are basically telling the old people, sit down, we got this, and there it is.
You were telling me a story off air about that. I mean, somebody told you, all right, your time has passed because you're one of the older guys now.
When they were rioting in Baltimore behind Freddie Gray.
When was that? Was it a couple years ago? What is that?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Maybe 4 now. I don't know. Time moves so fast. But they were rioting behind Freddie Gray, what happened in Baltimore. And I walked into a store, and the conversation between a young man and a clerk was going on. And the young man was like, man, he was saying we ought to burn this place down until they understand that we're not playing with them, that we want our rights. I said, but do you think burning down things is the way to handle it? And he said, with all due respect, OG, that's a street term for, you got credibility, you've been around, Right. He said, but when y'all handled it, we ended up in this situation right here. So either you guys get behind us or go get your rocking chair, sit it out, and we got this. So it's like you say, what can I say? You know what I'm saying? Because we failed. Every group before failed. And we always failed because we weren't willing to keep the heat up to where people say, you know what, we're going to actually make this a place where all men are created equal. And until they get to that point, until we can label people and make them less than us, even a cop, he'll say, if he walks into the room and they say, man, we heard you had to use force and you beat a guy. Oh, he was a scumbag. Oh, okay. He was a scumbag. So we can just, we label things so that we can get away with the behavior.
Right. So, but let me push back on that, Fred. I mean, you look at what Martin Luther King did, and then it pushed it forward. Things haven't there been improvements as we've gone forward? I mean, it isn't. I can't say we can call it failure, or I can't. Maybe you guys can. Isn't there been improvement?
No, there has been improvement, and there's been improvement every step of the way. This is the problem, and
not enough. Or what? Didn't go far enough.
It didn't go far enough, and the viewpoint of our white friends were basically we should be satisfied. Now, they wouldn't be satisfied if they were in the situation, but we should be satisfied. That look at the improvements we made for you.
Right.
Well, whoop-de-doo. You know what I'm saying? It's like, look, let me tell you what the young people are saying. Be thankful that this is actually a video I watched. A woman said it. Be thankful that we're fighting for equality and not putting in revenge.
Wow.
See, that's the way they think. And these are college students. This is a whole different group. But like I said, they believed. When I was a kid, we fought for our rights. These kids believe they have that right. And now you're showing them that they're not what they thought they were, and they are mad as hell.
So it's a different fight for them.
It's a different fight. With us, we were trying to get something.
Right.
These young people think you are taking something away from them. And, you fight harder when somebody's taking something from you than when you're trying to get something from somebody else.
Fascinating. You're listening to Reverend Fred Shaw. He is a former LA County Sheriff's deputy. He grew up on the streets of South Central. He is the international spokesman for a human rights organization called Citizens Commission on Human Rights. And he's also involved with the NAACP in Inglewood right now. He's the executive director, and he has been involved with the NAACP in other places, but particularly we got to mention Compton, because Compton's a pretty it was involved in 1992 with the riots very heavily. And you're listening, by the way, this is on WSMN 1590 AM out of Nashua, New Hampshire. You can get this video on YouTube and also on Facebook and at my website, seanburke.net. If you want to write and say whatever you want, and I can pass it on to Fred if you want, is write to heysean@seanburke.net. So, all right, Fred. So let's get down and dirty, because here's the deal. What about the destruction? I mean, that it happened in 92. It seems when there's a riot, there's destruction. It seems to me it's also hurting others. It's hurting minorities. I mean, it just kind of goes out and just does damage. Talk to us about that so we can understand this more.
That in this particular unrest, one of the things that we have noticed is that the media and the president and all of them who have identified the group that was causing the rioting and the fires and stuff like that. And then when you start breaking in, people who have not been able to make money, who are poor already, once you start creating the opportunity for them to get free stuff, then you see the looting. Now, if you talk to the protesters, and video from newscasts have proven it, we've seen the marchers protect officers who got separated from their group and were out there alone. We've seen them form chains and protect those officers. We've seen them form chains and stop them from destroying businesses. We've seen them doing a lot of those type of things, talking to the people. We've seen leaders of the groups basically saying, let's go home and stuff. Let's leave the criminal element out here so they're not mixed up with us. So none of us can control a thief. None of us can control a criminal element, especially when you have something that comes into the community and lights the fire that let these people go off. These people looting and rioting at the end were not at the protest marches in the beginning. They wouldn't even spend all day to do that. But they come in later, and luckily, if you noticed in LA lately, there hasn't been violence really in the last 2 nights, because they cornered a whole group of the cars, because they became an organized group that were hitting the businesses, and they set a trap, caught them, and then there was nobody to go riot.
I think they arrested them all. There's a couple thousand arrests or something like that. It's just amazing.
Most of the people who were arrested for curfew, but there was a criminal element that they caught. Yeah. And now the curfew, who had become 5 and 6 o'clock on our time on the West Coast, now we're already back up, extended to 9 o'clock, because it knocked out so much of the violence when who the president and others have identified as Antifa, when they no longer was in the equation, and then the criminal element was no longer in the equation. Now we've had all over California, and I mean thousands of children, and they're out there because they're not in school, they're not watching the NBA, they're not seeing baseball, they're not, so hey, let's go. I mean, so that's what's happening out there. But nobody's condoning the burglarizing of businesses. Many of those businesses are people who have worked all their lives and gotten their business, and now some of them didn't even have the opportunity or the money to even get the insurance to cover it, and they've lost everything. Nobody's in support of that. That is not the Black community. That is not what is trying to be done.
First of all, let's go back to we gotta clarify. So someone's breaking in, and here's people seeing it, and they don't have any money, and they don't have stuff, and they run in and loot. Still not okay, I assume.
No, it's not okay. It's not okay. And it is the fault of the politicians that get elected, who make these promises, who never fulfill them. And then, expect you to keep going along with the program. They expect us to be loyal to a Democratic Party that is doing, in my opinion, far more danger to us than a Republican Party. I could care less what the president says as long as he delivers. But these people give us great propaganda and never deliver. So it's time that all of us, just like the streets are coming together, the white kids, the Hispanic kids, the Asian kids, the black kids, maybe it's time that the political gang banging that's going on, that the people are caught in the middle of, maybe that has to change. And I think right now you're going to see that, because a lot of these politicians, you notice they're not out speaking to these kids. The leaders, they're not out speaking to these kids. They're speaking from the privacy of their office. They're speaking from their home, because they know that they have not provided the leadership that these kids would respect.
Thank you for bringing it. That I don't know what to say. I could not have given that answer, and I'm glad you did. But I will say, Fred, I have noticed that leaders have not stood up, and even black leaders. For a while, I said to my wife, I go, how come where are the, back in 92, I was in LA in 92. I remember driving home from work in 1992, the Rodney King riots. My simple little story, nothing like what you went through, because you were down in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Driving home through Hollywood, and there's buildings on fire on either side of the freeway. I mean, it was just outrageous. And back then it seemed like the political leaders, the black leaders at the time, every night would really get on TV or try to calm everything down. And maybe it's happened and the media hasn't shown it, but I haven't felt like that's been happening on really any leadership level.
Well, the problem is that the leaders have not been leaders for a long time. And the young group, they're not identifying people as leaders. It's like, in Riverside, a protest was organized that hundreds of people came to it. It was organized by high school students. In another place, it was a couple of college black students that got together and said, let's do this. And they're using social media in a way that we never even thought to use in the past. And so they can have thousands out in no time now. And they're even taking another step. Let me tell you something. I was listening to the news and they were interviewing one of the kids. He said, oh yeah, by the way, we just want these people who keep making these nasty remarks on social media, we're monitoring you. And we know who you are, and we'll deal with you later. Not with violence, we'll deal with you later. And so these kids, this is a smart generation. And they're like, oh no, we know how to get to you. We know how to, you think you can make these statements. One of the things I did want to talk about, when Kaepernick took a knee to protest social injustice, the NFL attacked him, the president attacked him, the president called the NFL players that stood with him son of bitches and stuff. They made it about the flag when it was never about the flag. They never would mention that a veteran told him that would be the proper way to protest. They didn't get into any of that. They just went into, he's standing against the flag. And the question that Black America is asking, when did the flag become more important than people? When did that flag become more important than my life? When all I'm asking for equality, and my people have fought for that flag too. One of the great, I won't even call his name because I've never known him to be this way, but one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL just recently made a statement that his parents fought in World War II for that flag and blah, blah. He acted like the Black people's parents didn't fight for that flag too, and they don't have the same comfort that he has. They don't have his reality, a beautiful wife, nice kids, living the American dream, but they're down there being killed in the street. So you can say, I'll never kneel for the flag, then what are you gonna do for the people who want to kneel for that flag because they don't get the justice that you get? White people do not, I've asked, unless they lived in the poor areas, I've never heard a middle class white person say they worry about their kids when they interact with police. They never have to do that. That's like a foreign thing. People have asked me, well, do you think people in jail are innocent? Didn't they do something to get there? They don't know the system like that because the system protects them, but it doesn't protect the others. So that's where we're seeing the divisiveness. That's where we're seeing the problem. And I think as the young people see it, because see, young people now, they interact so much on social media and different things, that this black guy is my friend and I'm defending him. This Hispanic person is my friend, I'm defending him. Right. They're saying, where's the white voices? Where are our voices? Oh, let's get out here and show them we with them. We're not part of this. And that's why you're seeing so many white kids out there. So a change is coming.
You mentioned somewhere you saw, I didn't see it, there is more whites than blacks in some of these protests. Is that right?
Exactly. Especially in the affluent areas. There's a protest being done all over California. And you go to places like Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, stuff like that, where protests are being held. These are predominantly white kids doing this. I mean, in those groups, yesterday I was watching Newport Beach, and the minority of the kids there were black. Most of them were white kids marching for this justice. And I'm gonna tell you, don't think that this is not noticed by Black America. They are happy to see this support. You know, because a mayor will walk down and march with us, and he will say, "Oh, kumbaya," and we need to stop the violence. But he's in charge of the police department that is doing it, but you're walking with the mayor like he's the savior. When all he has to do is tell the chief of police, you know what? If we can't put a handle on this, I got to get a new chief of police. So it's to placate, you know, it's to placate us in this stuff.
Okay, fair enough. Now there's one other thing that I've watched happen in Seattle. I'm also up in Seattle a lot, is the police department has gotten so lenient on any kind of crime that crime downtown was getting really bad. Now, of course, there's got to be an edge between if someone's committing a crime. So you talk to us because you're law enforcement and the person's black. It obviously shouldn't justify if they're doing a crime. So what do we do? What should happen?
You simply, this is, I'm glad you asked that, because law enforcement has been so out of control that when you bring their morals and ethical standards back in, they don't know how to administer them. So it's like, what you do is do your job, but you have to have a new definition of what that job is. When I was a law enforcement officer, people didn't complain about me. I took people to jail. I did all of that stuff. So the thing is when you have been able to get away with something and it becomes almost habit for them. We had a situation out here where some black people stood with store owners to stop them from breaking into a gold store. And then when the police arrived, they all flagged them down. The black people were flagging them down. The news media was right there flagging them down. The police came and everything. They threw the black people up against the wall. I mean, so you're looking at a mindset. I bet you those officers, I mean, that's the image you've seen from a helicopter person saying, "Oh, that looks like a bad dude," and all he's wearing is a pair of khakis and a white t-shirt. You know, and so the media's played a part in this. There's reports. I haven't seen it, but there's reports that during the Baltimore, they edited out the white people that were participating on the news broadcast. We know that the media have darkened the faces of black people to make them look more innocent when they were accused of crimes. This is not just a law enforcement officer. One of the great things that's coming out of this is they want an independent group, not the DA, to help file these charges and stuff and go through this system, because the DAs depend on law enforcement for the prosecution of their cases. So therefore, they compromise. You know, how do you get two different autopsy reports? This is a systemic thing. See? Right. So how do you have, and this came from an attorney who was, she was a DA at one time, a public defender at another, but when she was with the DA's office, she said that they were having one of those seminars, and one of the top DAs walked in and said, "Convicting the guilty is nothing. It is convicting the innocent to show your skills." Exactly. Exactly. So the thing is that you got to understand that there's a mindset out here that people like you don't understand, maybe for two reasons. Because you're not part of the suppressing of Black people. So you don't get that idea of suppressing Black people. You're not part of this injustice that's going on. You don't condone the killing of innocent people. So it's hard for you to believe why they're being done on both sides. Why would law enforcement, and we tend to want to believe that we can trust law enforcement, like we want to believe that we can trust our mental health practitioners, like we want to believe we can trust the medical profession. But these industries, we're supposed to be able to know that the FDA is protecting us, not working for the pharmaceutical companies. We should know. See, all that is wrong with America and the world is that we just have unethical people who are taking over industries and just imposing their will. And that's what's happening. You say that it's a man-made virus. The president accused China, China accused us. Well, if it's man-made, then what was the purpose?
Yeah. So
those are the things that we have to ask ourselves. These are the things that we got to look at. We have to, a very great man said, the price of freedom is constant alertness and a constant willingness to fight back. We always have to stay alert. We always have to fight back, and we can never value our comfort more than we value our freedom. And that's what we have to do.
You're listening to Fred Shaw, Reverend Fred Shaw. Fred, you have a little bit more time for me?
Oh, yeah, I'll give you some time. Mm-hmm.
We're on WSMN 1590. I brought Fred on because I really think that he's been through this. He's going to give us the perspective, and I think that he has. And I have a few more questions, Fred. If you have any questions, you want to write any comments to me, it's heysean@schomburg.net. The show is going to be on SoundCloud and iTunes and all over the podcast world after it's aired. Also on YouTube and Facebook. You can find it at schomburg.net. So, all right. I did not grow up like you grew up. Now, I interviewed, for all the listeners, some time back, Minister Tony Muhammad was on my show, and he told a story that he had for a college class, he took some kids out in, I think it was Beverly Hills or somewhere really nice, and they left the white ones in the van and put the black students out with a boombox on their shoulder walking down the street. And he said literally within a half a mile that the police had pulled him over and had him up against the car. So these kind of things, people like myself can't even fathom that. I know that. I'm not even trying to pretend I get it because it's never happened to me. Tell us, personally, you've had things like this happen to you. Does this really happen, man?
Man, before I was a law enforcement officer, and even once when me and Reverend Alfred Johnson was together, my car broke down, so I was driving a Regal. And I think I was still a law enforcement at that time. And just the mere fact that they saw two black guys in a Regal, they decided they had to stop me. And I had told Reverend Johnson, I said, man, they're gonna stop. He said, for what? We're not doing nothing. I said, I get it, but they're going, we talk about racial profiling and things like that. I knew what they were going to do. And then they pulled behind us, God did all that, and then they walked up and they saw me. And then they said, oh, okay, man, oh, when did you get this car? And then, they got the light, and they left. I was a law enforcement officer doing my morning job. We carry these packs where we keep our weapon in and our badge in. And then we can jog and stuff like that. And I get pulled over, I'm jogging, the guy pulls up next to me. And but he was smart enough to say, what's in that pouch? I said, my badge and my gun. Oh, where do you work? I work at your station. Oh, so this is just, but I'm jogging.
Yeah.
So even if let's say I was somebody that was just carrying a gun, what was the purpose of stopping me? Because I had a bag that officers carry that could have a gun in it. So you don't quite get, he knew something because he's like, this guy, he's just jogging, but that is the thing. Other people don't get stopped like that. Other people don't get killed like that. Other people don't go through that. And that's what we're looking at with the thing. Law enforcement has to do its job. They just can't overdo their job. When I was in training and stuff, I had a person tell me, where else can you violate people's rights and get away with it? It's like, because in the inner city, because most Black people, they don't go because of the lack of education and stuff. They don't want to confront the paperwork to complain. See, that's how education destroys your dreams, your hope, everything. You can't even go down and complain because they might tell you to fill out and you don't write well enough. So you went through 12 years of school, got a diploma, and you can't write well enough to fill out an application or a complaint form. This is the tragedy of the Black community. And so what happens is when leadership doesn't force the flow into survival acts, then the gangs force their mentality that you don't have to take this, rob, steal, do what you want. It's absolutely wrong to do that.
Sure.
But
it's survival.
It's survival. That's the point. And we got to get into America where money comes in. I've seen the president put $10 billion in small business loans that's supposed to go to inner city. I've seen a lot of different things that people are not giving credit for. But the thing is this. We have to straighten out the educational system. We have to straighten out the morality of this country. We must handle people who profit on the misery of other folks. And then when we do that type of thing, when we get into those nicks and crannies, when we quit rewarding the failure and start rewarding the enhancement. For example,
yeah, well, give me an example.
We give schools money because the kids can't read and they're failing. So you say 7 years from now, you only get this money if the kids are succeeding. And I bet you it all turns around.
Right.
Because as long as they're failing, you get the money, you just keep the kids failing to get the money.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we have to address. Those are the things that we got to bring to the table. Those are the things, and I'm so grateful to you for bringing me on the show to express these viewpoints, because I know your listeners probably have never looked at it from that point of view.
Yeah.
But they have to realize a guy like me is their greatest hope, because I have been a law enforcement officer. I do write and fight for kids' rights and through different organizations, be it CCHR, be it the NAACP. The good guys are coming out of this and emerging. But what if I had the proper education from the first grade or from kindergarten? Or my little grandbaby whose mother was reading to her at 2 years old and singing songs when she was in the womb. And now this kid has skipped the grade. She's super smart. How many lives are we destroying because we just won't give people an equal chance? And so, again, I thank you. And I'm still here if you need to ask other questions. I'm not leaving you. I've just taken the opportunity to thank you.
I appreciate that. And of course, I got to come back to you and ask you if you've ever thought about running for office.
Yeah, I do. But this is the problem with me. People have asked me to run for I ran for mayor at one time of the city of Compton, and I ran for the school board. It's just that my philosophy doesn't quite fit what some people are looking for. Because I believe that we can rise up out of this. And I believe that a lot of whites will come to our side, just like they're coming to the side of these children, if we show we're willing to do it by ourselves. And the mindset has been, they need to give us, they're doing this to us, and that may all be true. But it still doesn't change the fact that somehow we have to use our ingenuity, our willpower, and our understanding of life to elevate out of that. And it's still, that's our responsibility. And once you see me fighting hard enough, you'll say, look at that man fighting like that. And now you'll come and help me. You see what I'm saying? So at least we got to do our part. And then once we do our part, but a lot of this is changing. I see what's going on right now, not condoning the looting and the fires, but what's going on right now. I see this as a very positive step because we don't have to feel like we're in this alone.
Because of the participation of whites.
Whites and Hispanics and Asians and everybody's in this one. Yeah. And that's how come there could be so many people in so many locations.
You know, and I mentioned earlier, I'm not seeing leaders out there, but you mentioned before we came on the air, you were marching with other people of faith. Tell us about that, just so we understand because I didn't see that in the media.
Well, K.W. Toulis, Reverend K.W. Toulis, he's the leader of the Black Ministers Conference here in Los Angeles, South area. And he called a protest, and I was invited to come, and we marched from about 3 blocks to where City Hall is, and then some of us stayed for the second part, and they prayed for the mayor and for peace and calm, and they did their part. But the position was a kind of subservient position to the overall march, because the clergy should have been out there in the beginning. All of the interfaith clergy should have been out there in the beginning. And they have to show these people they can be trusted, and they got to show these people that they understand about this injustice and stuff. And so many ministers have taken the position, oh, well, we just have to pray. Actually, prayer comes before the march. You pray, right, and then you take action.
Then you do something.
You know what I'm saying? And so, sometimes we just think we can pray. No, you pray, you ask for a successful march, you ask for change, but now you got to go out and be about that change and make it happen. And that's what needs to be done. But any effort by any group that was nonviolent, that went to unify, because we did accomplish the fact that a lot of the law enforcement officers took a knee with the ministers together, and we prayed for those officers and things. So, there's a lot of us trying to get good out of this and build relationships while we're all going through this together. And I want to thank the National Guard and a lot of these police officers, be they sheriffs or whatever. They have shown remarkable restraint. They have been seen hugging and holding people who are crying in their arms, and they let the human side come out. And when they take a knee, it shows the community the human side. And that's what one Hispanic kid, and I know we don't have all day, one Hispanic kid was talking to a National Guard, and he was telling him, you don't know how we feel. We don't know how, you don't know this and that and other. And the National Guardman told him, you don't know my viewpoint. I'm just doing my job. He said, and when I do my job, I help you guys be safe. And the kid cried.
Wow.
So the acknowledgement of understanding why they're marching, the people who are marching with us and standing with us, you don't know what that is doing for relationships across the board.
Wow. Having you out there being a leader and talking, brother, makes me feel better. This has been disturbing. Anybody who's watched it, it's disturbing. Not only what happened to George Floyd and then the rioting and it's just the upset. It's disturbing. And so I really appreciate you bringing some words on for us.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that we understand this is not about just George Floyd.
Yeah.
This is a systemic, continuous killing of unarmed people. Most people in America right now walk with their cell phones in their hands. And if you're Black, that's automatically a gun a lot of times. And so, we just got to be able to look at the situation without any preconceived ideas, without any biases, and handle people like they're people.
Amen. Thank you for your time. Reverend Fred Shaw, appreciate it. Good to see you again, and stay safe out there, will you?
You too, and thank you again. And if you know any other shows, if you have any people can help this movement through me, I'm more than willing to go on the shows. I'm more than willing to do what I can to help our white brothers understand what is going on in this community and why we're taking these stands. And I'm not out there marching with the young people. I'm marching with the old people. I can't run that fast. So I can't, you know what I'm saying? I can't withstand rubber bullets and stuff. But we're, you know, we understand why they're there, and we understand why people are standing with them.
Thank you for your time, man.
All righty. Okay. Thank you.
Reverend Fred Shaw, not much I can add to that. I've known the man of 30 years, and he's always been a gentleman with a lot of integrity, regardless of whatever situation and whatever role he's playing. So I wanted to turn to him. I hope that that's helped you. It's tough for me as a white male growing up the way I did to even come close to understanding the situation that they face, being a minority and especially blacks. So we definitely have a situation happening in the country. Take that information. Hopefully it helps you. I want to thank Tracy Andrews-Scavage for her work in securing Fred to come on the show. She works hard to give us a great show. Thank you very much, Tracy. And you can find this show at WSMN 1590 AM. That's where it's broadcast. And then it goes to seanburke.net, so you can get a link there and listen to it. You can also find this on YouTube. The audio versions will be out on SoundCloud and iTunes and Google Play, all across the podcast world. All I can say right now is go out there, and I always say that this at the end of my shows: be good to each other, do something good for someone else, try to make someone else laugh. That's just one of the goals every day I try to do. It's a little tougher right now because you may not even see anybody else every day, but do what you can. Email, you can Zoom with people, you can even write a card. When you go out to the grocery store, pick up a card and write someone. All right, take care out there. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.